Welcome to Success Authorities Conversation Street with Leadership Authority Peter Beaumont and with Business Culture Authority Ron Lehmann and me, Linda Ruhland, Success Authorities founder.
It appears that what we ignore is the foundational level of any group of people, and that's at the conversational level. When I look at society, I see that we have really been unable to carry on meaningful conversations with each other now, and it has to do with the psychology of groups, really the neuroscience of fight and flight. And the remedy that I see that we can do is to learn how to converse with each other on a more meaningful level and do some real problem solving. And I reviewed, because I had the time after I essentially shut down the organizational part of my work, is I went back to my counselor training books, my therapy training books, and realized that a lot of what is talked about now in rather lofty terms, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, conversational intelligence, isn't anything new. It's been around for a long time. And the practitioners of active questioning and active listening have had it right all along, but we just haven't been doing it. And so that's what I've been preaching, I guess, a little bit on my soapbox and in my presentations that I do to organizations and the coaching work that I do one-on-one, is that we have to learn almost anew how to speak with each other. So that's the overall perspective, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense because sorry, going American there with semi. I'm going to semi name drop here because I was talking to Jill. Oh gosh,
Conrad.
Thank you. Yeah, I was talking to her yesterday, and you remember we talked about how we would try and have her as a guest, and one of the subjects we discussed was, why are we not having conversations anymore? And that's partly what we've asked her to talk to. But Jon, you've just hit on it too. What do you think is the cause? I completely agree with you. We've got to get back to it, and we can explore that a bit. But why? What's happened? Why have the wheels fallen off, do you think?
I have a general hypothesis about it, in that the difference between our present age and the evolution of human history is we never had the technology that we have now to broadcast information or misinformation. And it appears to me, and I agree with, remember that book that I referred to you a couple of weeks ago when we met, about the chief cognitive bias being my side bias. And that's the tribal bias we all acquire as we align ourselves with one particular group versus one other particular group. And I guess I'm referring to our political system in the United States, is we have encamped into two main groups. And this bias of my side emphasizes all the other cognitive biases within sort of this toxic soup of an inability to actually see other points of view.
Yeah, I think
that is kind of my opinion of that.
Yeah, the book was called The Bias That Divides Us, which you kindly shared with me. So here's something we talked about last week, Jon, and you may or may not know this, but I think it's really interesting because I somewhere read that wine consumption in France has declined quite rapidly, right, over the last 20 plus years. It's almost halved, which is sacre bleu in France. I mean, that's like we drink water. And there's the same trend in Italy and Spain, again, major growing wine countries. The BBC did some research on it, so I tend to trust it. And what they found is that there was a correlation with the decline in families getting together for dinner and or lunch on the weekends. So there was no social occasion for wine to be drunk as it used to be. And I find that intriguing because it's kind of, to me, it's a trend where we don't get together as families anymore. We don't have those, what everybody calls kitchen table discussions. And I think that is probably, it's never one thing, is it? But that's probably one of the reasons. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think so. I mean, because the act of breaking bread has been throughout the last several millennium of human history, and even in parts of the world, mortal enemies, once they sit down to break bread, to share tables, so to speak, are able to start talking with each other on a deep level. Yeah, I think that's a great observation. And in fact, if you notice restaurant behavior now, you can have people that are actually at the same table, but they're all looking at their phones.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a really good point. So
not just at restaurants.
Yeah, I know families who, and we do it too if we have a family gathering, and it's too little times we do it. But like at the holiday periods, I have a basket where everybody has to put their phone in it and can't bring it to the table. So we've had to do that now.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you get the same reaction from people who don't have their phone to people who are, waiting to go outside and have a cigarette. They start to shake and get nervous and twitchy, and it's just such a part of our lives that to be without it seems like this great loss, where I guess I'm old enough to remember when we were up without it all the time. And it's become such a factor. And I think the same thing happens in business meetings. Everybody's looking at their phone or looking at their laptop, and I don't think that the typical organization meeting is structured for conversation. It's structured for something else, either distributing information and getting everyone to nod, or something else. If there's conversations, they happen after the meeting. And another thing about organizations is I think there isn't time. People are so busy because of having, short staff or whatever it is. There's no time for the organic conversations that can spring up in a workplace. So I think certainly socially in families and in organizations, there's structural barriers now.
Well, that's a great point, Ron, because what we've done is we precipitated it too. But by going to hybrid and remote, right, we've actually accelerated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the water cooler metaphor.
Right.
Yeah. Place.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, people just don't. We've created impediments to it, to something that maybe as humans, and I'd be interested in all of your opinions on this, that we resist it for some reason because of my side bias or other things, but we resist having real open conversations where we listen and try and understand the other point of view, or, seek new ideas or whatever it is. I think we've got some built-in resistance to that. And now we have all these wonderful impediments, so we don't really have to face that because we don't have time.
How much of this is related to anonymity? When you are on a mobile device or a phone, you can hide basically behind whatever is going on, whether that's a chat screen or let's just say even a Zoom call like we're having right now. People don't necessarily have to plug in their video. And even if they do they become part of the overall gallery of pictures there, or are they individuals with identities that when they express an opinion are accountable for it?
People have seen what happens when you express an opinion. I'm, for one, very reluctant to do anything on LinkedIn. I mean, there are a lot of things that I could say, but I realized that the things that I could say could inflame people because I operate from a scientific perspective when it comes to human behavior, such as pointing out how automatic our lives have become. I mean, we all have a mutual friend who's a neuroscientist whose entire field has laid bare this notion that we are volitional actors, that we have agency. They point out that we're essentially 85% automatic. And it could be even higher than that. So when we talk about what we think, feel, and how we want to act, we're not really doing it out of choice.
Yeah, we're not making conscious decisions
Right.
for most of the time, or rational decisions for that matter. I think, we all pride ourselves on being very rational, but in fact, all the and you mentioned Dr. Terry Wu and his work, but all the science around decision making is very clear that it is rarely rational.
Right.
We think we're being rational if we think at all about it, but there's all these automatic systems that are working all the time, and when we're not consciously aware of them and consciously choosing, we just go wherever we've gone, and then that becomes a habit, and then that becomes the way we do things, and we don't really examine that.
So I go back to my educational foundation, which has helped me a lot in my coaching practice when I talk with people. And that's once you ask a question, if it's an open-ended question, which it should be, then you have to listen. And you have to withhold judgment. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have judgment, because we all do. Immediately after someone takes a position, we have our own perspective. But the point is to stop, to do a pause, and rather than say rebuttal, just simply say, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me a little bit more how you got to that perspective," which opens up a conversation in ways that we normally don't have. And that's that pause that Daniel Kahneman talks about in Thinking Fast and Slow. The late Daniel Kahneman, we lost him a couple weeks ago. Stop, pause in order to engage your prefrontal cortex, because your immediate reaction is driven by the amygdala. That's the automatic response, the fight, flight, freeze, and another F that I could think of but not use. We need to slow down in order to have a real conversation. And in a fast world where my side versus your side, well, pausing, that's like asking the barbarians to pause.
Stop raping and pillaging, I think is where you were going. But
but I think, all the electronics we talked about has really exacerbated that, because it's so easy and efficient to send a text or send an email, which is really not conversation. Even though we can do 200 texts back and forth, it's not conversation. It's not the same, because part of the message is missing, because we're trying to interpret the words, and we run that through our filters, and we add tone, and we add intent, and we add subtext. Whereas when you're talking to someone face to face, I think it's easier. Still not easy, but it's easier to take in more accurate information and listen. We still have all the biases operating, but it's so convenient to send a text and think I've communicated.
That's exactly right.
Well, or an email, right?
Oh yeah, anything that doesn't involve two-way real-time conversation. I
Yeah.
mean, I would put Zoom ahead of both of those because it's real time and people are there like this. But I know I think I'm in this one narrow way, like most humans, where I've done that in order to avoid a conversation. I'll send a text rather than call or get together with someone because I don't want to have the back and forth. I just want to say what I want to say and then hope they agree.
So
Which is fine if you're sending fax. If you're sending, here's the date of the meeting, I mean, that's perfectly appropriate. But if you want to have the two-way, or as they say in the computer business, full duplex communication, both people giving and taking, I think we go with the easy a lot of times. I know I do.
yeah, yeah, I think you may be right. I'm curious, John, on why we're not curious anymore, and we don't pause and we don't listen.
Well, I think Ron just kind of highlighted a lot of it as our lives have been altered, perhaps irrevocably, that we rely now on information from a tiny screen rather than going to somebody and saying, "Hey, I need to do this. What do you know about that?" We don't ask a human. In fact, when I was doing corporate training a few years ago, one of my large clients told me that the spontaneity of coworkers actually asking each other for help was a great benefit to learning processes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you don't have a coworker next to you, if you don't have any opportunity to ask a question, it's like law of use and disuse. You forget how to do it. And I think we have forgotten how to talk to each other.
Well,
right.
we don't need to. That's one of the problems. We can just Google it or ask an app called ChatGPT to give us the answers. And so that's accelerated it too, I think. Yeah, you're right.
But I think that also narrows the field of information that we can take in. We can create a system that depending on what I put into Google, that's what I'm going to get back, as opposed to when you talk to a human and ask a question, you have no idea what you're going to get back. But that's where the value might be.
Yes.
But again, the efficiency of, well, I'll just Google this, as opposed to, I'll use Peter as my example. If I wanted to know something about England or one of the other places in the world he's lived, I could call Peter and say, what's this about? Tell me about this. Or I could Google it and get a bunch of random information, because I know from experience, whatever I get from Peter is, first of all, probably going to be firsthand. So that's good. The second part of it, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be different than I got. And I should probably do that experiment. I should ask Peter something and then Google it. And at the very least, the Google will be more sterile.
Right.
And it won't trigger anything new for me in terms of, oh, you said this. Well, that sounds like Sioux City, Iowa. I've been there. That's the popcorn thing of conversation is the thing that I always find where
That's
the surprising value is. You get something, and I know, and we've all talked about this, that I find myself drawn to people who will surprise me in a conversation and intrigue me and get me thinking differently or about something else. And people who are more, I don't want to say predictable, but kind of I'm going to get a certain thing. I find myself leaning toward the former in that case, because I get more than information, I get energy from that, and it gets me to jump off. And we've all had that experience together of you say this and we go this, and sometimes it goes down what we affectionately refer to as squirrel holes. But every once in a while, there's a pretty interesting squirrel down there. So So I have now beaten that analogy into death, so we'll move on. But I did want to say something else about that my side bias, because I was thinking about where you see that in business, and I think you see it um, at the almost every level, departments against departments. It's my side versus, sales versus research, or whatever those are. And even I've done a lot of work in organizations that have shift workers. And I don't care what business it is, third shift hates second shift. We do all the work, they don't do anything. Second shift hates first shift, and first shift thinks the other two are just worthless. Everybody takes their side. And then I've seen people who move to another shift and quickly adopt the attitude of the new shift. So they were on first shift and they didn't like it. And then they moved to second or third, and now they don't like first, even though the people haven't changed. And it's fascinating to watch. And I think that's the my side thing. This is my new team. I need to be accepted by the new team. So I hate
Yeah,
the
it's tribal, right?
yeah.
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 It resembles high school, where you're just trying to find yourself in a space, in a group or a clique, and doing whatever you can to fit in.
Yeah.
Also
And
tribal.
yeah.
Yes,
But
exactly.
how much of that is unconscious? Again,
Yeah.
back to it, we adopt that. And I know I read a book or an article about how to enjoy a high school reunion. And they had a bunch of really interesting tactical things to do. But the biggest thing they said was you have to go as the person you are now and not fall back into the person you were. And the couple of reunions I've gone to, I've been remarkably unsuccessful at that.
Say that
It's like
again, Ron. Say that again.
you go as the person you are now,
Yeah,
not as the high schooler you were.
right.
And you get there and you talk to the people you talked to in high school. You don't go over to the cheerleaders and start talking, because it was a caste system, at least in my high school.
Yeah.
And or you don't talk to these people, and you could see the clumps of the same tribes. And
Right.
I think you could, we can say, well, those were our friends and we want to see them. But I was acutely aware the last time I went is how difficult it was for me to show up as who I am now and go, well, I guess I could just talk to just about anybody if I wanted to. But I couldn't, I couldn't do it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Conversation Street. For more information or to schedule a private conversation with Success Authorities, email us at inquire@successauthorities.com.